Globor 36 enthusiast here with a video requested by Crooked Legs about understanding some of the probabilities behind various tech roles. Crooked Legs asked for a discussion of each of the technologies, and I do believe there's a video in the Developer Diaries series about the technologies in V4, and I'll put a link in the description below on that. If you want to understand the probabilities of how many successes you might get in a particular series of roles, then you're going to need to use a binomial distribution. And there's I just use this one, a free one online, omnicalculator.com. But you could get any binomial distribution calculator. I'll just show you how this one works. So let's say that you're talking about a tech that needs a 7 or higher. Well, that's a 50% probability that you will succeed, okay? And if you want to try to understand how many roles you would need to succeed, what I would think about is 8 roles. You know, if I needed 4 successes, I would intuitively think, okay, I need to roll 8 times at 50-50, and the most likely outcome here would be that I would succeed 4 times. You can see this distribution curve of the probabilities. As you mouse over each of these things, you can see, oh, how many, if I rolled 8 times, if I flipped a coin 8 times, what's the likelihood I get 7 heads? And it's 3.13%. So you can see that the most likely result, there's a 27.34% probability that you would get 4 4s. But an interesting thing when you start delving down into the math is, what if I did 7 events? I tried a 50-50 7 times. Well, this situation is where it's as likely that I will only get 3 successes or less as it is that I would get 4 successes or more. Does that make sense? This happens to be a perfectly symmetrical distribution curve. And that makes sense with a 50-50 probability, right? If I try 7 50-50 probabilities, then I would expect 3.5 successes, and that means that half of them would be 3 or less, and then half of them would round up to 4 or more, right? So if you did the math and you took the probability of 3 results, 27.34, and added it to 16.41, the probability of 2 events, and added that to the probability of 1 event, 5.47, and added 0.78, if you do that math, you will see that this is 50%. And if you just look at the curve, you can tell that's going to be the case, because everything is a mirror image. The chance of 3 successes out of 7 is 27.34. The chances of 4 successes out of 7 is 27.34. So if your goal is to be as likely as not to succeed, then 7 tech successes would be all that you needed. If your goal was, hey, I want to have a better chance of success than of failure, then with 8 rolls, it turns out to be 63.66 are all these distributions added up of 4 or more. So you have a 64%, approximately 64% chance of getting your tech, a 7+ tech on 8 rolls or higher. Another breakpoint is 10 rolls or higher. At 10 rolls or higher, then the chance of succeeding is 82.81%. So these distributions add up to 82.81, and these guys add up to approximately 17%. So if your goal is, hey, I want to know what's the chance I'd have an 80% or higher of succeeding, well, 10 rolls is your breakpoint. And then if you want to know 90%, would be you'd need 12 rolls or higher. That comes out to 92.71 are 4 or more successes. And then you know, 7.3% approximately for these, for a 1, 2, 0, 1, 2, or 3. Okay, so that's the 50% success rates. Let's talk about needing to get an 8 or higher. Well, the probability of that succeeding is 41.6 repeating. So if we look at the breakpoint for more likely than not to succeed, you need 9 rolls or higher. If you look at what happens to the distribution curve at 8, now you can see 3 is the most likely thing to happen. So to get us above 50% success, we need to hit 9 or higher. We need to roll 9 or higher times. And the chance of success with 9 or more rolls is 55.89%. If you want to know the breakpoint for an 80% success rate with 41.67%, it's 12. So if you remember, for 7 or higher, 12 was a 90%. With 8 or higher, a 12 is an 80% success. It's 80.83%. And the next breakpoint isn't quite perfect. It's if you have 14 or more rolls at 8 or higher, then there's an 89.96% chance of success. So almost 90%. You're only 0.04 away from 90% success rolling 14 or higher. So I can understand people thinking, like, if I roll 14 times at an 8 or higher, I would intuitively think it's a lot higher than 90%. You know, there's still a 10% chance, even rolling 14 times in 14 games, where you're trying to roll for something like large ship construction or jets, you're only going to succeed 90% of the time after 14 rolls. And this is a important thing for Russia and USA that both need jets. So in long-range aircraft, I think maybe it's not, I can't remember now off the top of my head whether the Soviets need jets or long-range aircraft. I'm pretty sure it's rockets and jets for the Soviets. So that's something to take in mind. You know, with Russia, you might not start rolling for something like jets until turn 7. And with the US, you might not start rolling until Japan declares war on China. So you might not have as high a chance of getting the tech strategic objectives with the Soviets or the US as you think you would. Let's talk about the 9 or higher, which is a 33% chance of success. So with this distribution, the first breakpoint is 11. So at 11, at first it looks like these two are, this is similar to our 7 or higher 50-50 chance, but note that this isn't a symmetrical distribution, because right here at 5 or higher, that's a higher probability than 2 or lower. And so you end up having a little bit more on the right side of the curve, on the success side of the curve. So for an 11 or higher at 33%, there's a 52.74% chance that you will succeed. The next breakpoint with 33% is 16. Quite a bit more. To get to 80%, you need 16. So 82.71 is 4 or higher all added up. And to get to a 90% or higher, you need 19 rolls at 9 or higher. So that shows you that things like strategic rockets and heavy strategic bombers, if you get a success on that, you should really be pleased, because it totally changes the statistics for you. So let's say that I fail the first 3 times. I still have a 10% chance that rolling another 19 times I won't succeed, right? Because the dice don't have memory. That's actually, I said it was 10%, but it's actually more like 8%. But anyway, But if I succeed, and now suddenly I only need to get 3 successes or less, well, that changes things significantly. Let's look at something like this. Now, if I get 1 success, I now can include this big distribution. The next biggest distribution gets added to a successful outcome, if that makes sense, because I only need 3 now to succeed. And you can see that the first tech success is going to capture you the most distribution, and then the second one less, and the third one even less. Of course, you only need 1 more success. So if you've gotten 3 stages, so when you have these high rolls where you need a 9 or higher, one thing you should think about is if you've failed repeatedly, like let's say you've tried 5 times for getting heavy strategic bombers and you just haven't succeeded, and here it is, turn 12. If you're the Soviets, you might consider saying, there's some other techs that are more valuable and more pressing for me and more likely that I'll get them. I'm going to stop rolling for strategic rockets and I'm going to switch over to advanced artillery or something like that. That might be a reasonable thing for you to do. And another thing about this is it's probably very valuable for you to roll for your difficult to achieve techs, like America rolling for heavy strategic bombers or strategic rockets, and the Soviets rolling for strategic rockets. You want to do those early. Those need to be some early techs. Maybe not your Russian first tech that you do with your rapid industrialization. I'm not proposing that. But I definitely think that you can't think, I'll wait till the last 6 turns and try for strategic rockets. That's a very unlikely scenario for you to succeed, because 6, using that goofy analogy, you'd have 8.23 plus 1.65, so we're up to about 10. You get about 10% chance that you pull that out of the hat. I mean, it's possible, but it's unlikely. So hopefully that addresses your concerns there, Crooked Leg, or that discussion. There's one more thing I want to talk about. Just in general, if we're thinking about the game going to, say, turn 19, let's talk about Germany. Germany starts off with 3 major factories, and they'll very likely on the first turn upgrade that 4th major factory. So they'll have 18 rolls at 4, and then they'll have 1 roll at 3. So that's a total of 75 tech rolls, okay? And let's say that we think about, with the 50% chance of succeeding, let's say that we're going to figure roughly that most of our 7+ techs will take 8 turns. There's a 63.7% chance of succeeding with 8 turns, but sometimes we'll get a little bit faster, sometimes we'll get a little bit slower. We could probably roughly guess that they might take 8. And that gives us a little buffer for not being quite as lucky as we'd like to be. So what you can do is you can just take 75 and say, okay, I definitely want to get, say, advanced mechanized infantry, and I want to get radar, and I want to get let's say factories and improved construction and airborne. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 40 of my 75 techs. Now I've got 35 techs left over. Well, I definitely want to get heavy armor, and I want to go for advanced subs. Well, those are the ones that are at an 8 or higher, so the chances of success are lower, so I don't think we should count 8, but 9 is more likely than not. Or if I like the 60%, if that's a break point that feels good to me, 8 for the 50% was 63.7%. A 10 or higher is 65.86% for the 8 or higher rolls. So maybe I think, okay, I'll ballpark figure out that, or feel like that's going to be a 10 for each of them. And I had 35 left over, so that's 3.5 more 8+ techs that I can kind of guesstimate on, that I'll succeed on. So that helps you with your planning. Another very interesting thing to think about is stage 2. So we hit the max we can do is hit stage 2 before the 7th turn, before July of 1939, right? So a lot of times with our tier 1 techs that we're going to prioritize and say, this is the first thing I want to go for is this particular tech, you know, a lot of times sorry, I must have bumped my screen a little bit. We'll be at stage 2 and then turn 7 will start. So let's look at how many rolls would I need to do to predict that I'll get those next 2 stages of tech. In this situation, we want to reflect on how it was that we had 8 or 7. We could actually think about with 3 tech rolls, we'll have exactly the same chance of succeeding and getting that tech as we won't get that tech. So for a lot of players, you might get the tech that you really want if it's a 7 or higher on turn 9. That's a 50-50 chance you could get it on turn 9, and there's a 50-50 chance that you don't get it by turn 9. That doesn't mean that it's 50-50 9 and 50-50 10. It just means that it's as likely for you to get it by 9 as it is for you to not get it by 9. So that's another thing to think about. So just my ramblings on tech and distribution and probability. I'll also post that link for the discussion of each of the individual techs. Hope you found this helpful.